welcome to another episode of Chatterbox with me, Mel Biggs. This is the podcast where I get to sit down every month with one of my mates from the UK or Europe folk music scene and chat to them more about their career, their music education and their life in folk music. This month I'm joined by the fantastic English Melodionista Saul Rose. He is a Morris dancer, Morris musician. He gets absorbed into various different sides, but I guess most notably he's known for Hexham Morris as well as many others. He plays in a couple of different Ceilidh bands that have been transformational in the sound of English Ceilidh dance music. As well as his Ceilidh and his dance background, he's played in many bands, probably most notably with Eliza Carthy in all of her various lineups over the years. Faustus as well, with Benji Kirkpatrick and Paul Sartin. It's a really nice opportunity for me to get to know him better. He's always been somebody that I know I can sit down and have a beer with at a festival. And funnily enough, we were both at Shrewsbury Folk Festival just before we recorded this interview. Just a heads up to let you know that Saul does go into detail around the circumstances of Paul Sartin's death, and if you'd rather not listen to that, then you can see the timestamps in the description of that section of the conversation, and you can simply just skip past it. I hope you enjoy this conversation. It really did open my eyes to a lot of different things that Saul has done that I was not aware of, and he's had a very wide and varied career, not just within music. So without much further ado, let me introduce Saul Rose. Hello, Saul. Welcome to Chatterbox. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm okay, Mel. Nice to see you. Yeah.
I'm feeling a bit flat, actually. I don't know about you. You've had quite a long summer already.
Yeah, I have. I have had a long summer. I'll just show you my wrist.
Wow.
Yeah, mostly August. August has been epic.
Interestingly, when we booked this in, you did say you're having quite a quiet year this year, but hence why you said August would be great.
Well, I underestimate August sometimes. The touring seasons, so spring and autumn, are definitely thinner than they used to be. But I'm pleased to report that August has been epic.
Have you mainly been gigging or playing for dance, or is it just been a mixture of everything like normal?
Nice bit of both. So Sidmouth. Well, you see, Sidmouth was supposed to be quiet, but Sidmouth and I have a long-standing relationship in which it will find me for music. So I arrived at Sidmouth with one gig and two workshops, and I was set to play the Blackmore and teach up at the Artist Reception School. And then by 8 o'clock on the Saturday of Sidmouth, I'd already played the Bulletin and the Ham. So, it's just how it is. I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. Whitby, we played with Whapweasel, and I played for the Newcastle Kingsmen, which I joined whilst not concentrating, and then down to do Towersey and Shrewsbury. So, yeah, it's been full on, but a nice mix of stuff.
I caught up with Simon Kerr on the campsite at Shrewsbury this weekend, and he said that it took you 48 hours. Well, it took him 48 hours to walk again after your double jig at Sidmouth. For those listening that don't know, Saul and Simon did a double jig where they played for each other to dance to, and it was absolutely incredible. I had front row seat.
Yeah, we didn't stop playing while we were dancing. I wonder if that was that's what did him in. Yeah.
But you had so much more weight with the handry. How did you feel about it afterwards?
I was fine. It's
Brush
fine.
off.
But the thing is that Simon now really only plays for Morris. He doesn't dance anymore, and I'm still actively dancing for Hexham. Yeah. So I'm in slightly better nick, and I might have a couple of years off his total. So I like to think that he did it with a Dino Buffetti, and I did it with a Handry 18, and it was kind of like a weight penalty, like you get in touring car racing. If you're too fast, they put concrete in the boot.
You were telling me last year when we were catching up at Shrewsbury that you had got quite a lot of bits of metal in your legs, though, from various horrendous car injuries and things like that, I think, car accidents.
No. That I broke my left leg twice, once at school and then once playing five-a-side football in Essex, so that was vaguely predictable. I did have a car accident last year, and I had a knee injury around about the same time, and we wondered if there was a correlation between the two. I have had an MRI on it, and they found a bit, so I've been referred to orthopaedics. That I think is from the surgery when I broke it the second time, and so I think the car accident was all right. Airbag didn't go off, so I think that's okay. Yeah, and to be honest, the knee has just got on with it, and I'm back dancing, and it's good.
Yeah.
Whitby definitely improved my leg muscles. There's no doubt about that. But that's what Whitby does, right?
It's the test, isn't it? It's like, how fit am I? Am I Whitby fit? And usually the answer is definitely not, because nowhere else generally has those sorts of hills.
Not that you have to go up and down all the time. Sidmouth is pretty hilly, but they've got a bus.
I would like to sort of go back in time, if that's okay with you, and talk about where you started with Morris and music, because I know that it's a lineage with your family. I know your mum was heavily, and maybe still is. I don't know your mum personally, but I know she has a history with Northwest Morris. Tell us where you're from and like how you got into it all to begin with.
I was basically born into it. I went to my first Sidmouth in 1975, and when I was 2. It was at that Sidmouth that Roy Dommett, the inimitable and sadly missed Roy Dommett, was teaching what he had to describe as a ritual dance for women, which is basically Northwest Club Morris, in the tennis courts of Sidmouth. And the story goes, I was too little to remember, but the story goes that there were eight women, Roy Dommett, in the middle of the tennis court, all the husbands facing out, like forming a guard, and all the misogynistic ring members, who I'm sure are not like that anymore, were yelling abuse and spitting because women were trying to Morris dance.
Oh my God! Okay.
Yeah, it sort of becomes all the more hilarious because what they did, if you do that to someone like my mum, she just goes, right, I'm doing it. You know, they effectively sealed their own fate for women Morris dancing, because what they did is they picked on the wrong 8 women. Because one of the other women in there was a lovely woman called Jan, who went on to form the Point and Gemmers, who were a great Northwest side in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Yeah, it just kind of galvanised my mum to go, right, if that's what you think, I'm doing it. And I love that.
Was your mum a founder member of the Fed? I don't know, actually. I can't remember in history when the Federation was set up. But
no, she wasn't. She never really got involved in Morris politics outside of the teams that she started. She actually started 4. She started the Flowers of May with Andy Cutting's mum, who went on to run that. And then roughly every sort of between 4 and 8 years, there'd be an AGM where mum would get upset, she'd go off and start another one. So then she started Whitethorn. Then she started Benskins. And the last team that she started was the Chiltern Hundreds, who are still going strong. I got a photo of them with 24 up, 3 sets of 8.
That was Whitby, wasn't it?
Yeah, quite extraordinary. So I was a founder member of both Benskins and the Chiltern Hundreds, and I was band leader of Chiltern Hundreds for a number of years. And they spent all of Whitby going, come and play with us, come and play with us. And I've just literally put my Melodeon down from playing with someone else, and in the end I had to join them.
Just add another Melodeon to the wrangling of Melodians that are on the front line. I didn't know that Chilts was one of your mum's sides. That's amazing.
Yeah, and that band of 800 Melodians is my fault.
You started that off with your mates, was it? Who else played alongside you for Chilts back in the day?
Back in the day, it would have been Paul Nye, who was in Random with me. My dad played Melodeon a bit, and latterly we had Jim Sawyer and Derek Tarrant came and joined us as well, and Dennis and Pauline, who live in Dent in Cumbria, and Pauline's in every Morris side there is, I think. So yeah, and we had the drummer from Random, Roger Smith, playing side drum, and my mum used to play the bass drum. In my time, that was one hell of a band. It sounded amazing. Still does now. I mean, it's a different cast, but the principle's the same.
Yeah, totally. Did you start the tradition of D minor, G minor boxes, or was that Tom or someone else?
No. I can still remember when it happened. So I was at Towersey Festival many years ago when it was on the original site, and Mr. John Spires came running out of the music stalls where he was working, believe it or not, before Bella had made it large. He used to flog instruments at festivals to supplement his income. And he came running out going, you have to try this, you have to try this. I got bored and I was learning how to tune boxes, and I retuned my poker work to G minor, D minor. Just play a normal major tune on it and it comes out minor. And I said, okay, that's just brilliant. I want one of those. So he sorted me one out, and it rather spread.
It is very, very amusing, actually, when that does happen and they've got sort of the other box by their feet and they do the switch. Yes, I've seen that. I knew that Derek and Jim were good friends of yours, and they kind of had modelled their style on you. They kind of talk about that a lot in the descriptions of their YouTube videos that have now got hundreds of thousands of views. It's crazy. But your influence in the scene, I think, is kind of within the Morris scene, certainly, feels on a par with Andy Cutting in that sense of, you have that sound that goes and is infectious and people hear it and they want to be able to do it.
It's really flattering actually to think that, to what bowel music is to Andy Cutting, you have Morris and Ceilidh, and that's my influence. And
totally.
So Andy and I actually sort of grew up together within a Morris team. His dad, who sadly died quite recently, John, R.I.P. And my dad danced in the same Morris team, and we both wore the kit and danced. And I don't think Andy did very much because he was a bit older, but he's 5 years older than I am, and he discovered the Melodeon and locked himself in his room for 8 years and played for 12 hours a day, and then came out the other end, Andy Cutting. And obviously all that happened to me 5 years later. But it did happen to me, and actually how the Melodeon and I found each other is quite a sweet little story. I think it was either Chippenham or Swanage, because there's a bit of pedestrianised high street in both those places that looks about the same. And I was 10, so I can't actually remember which one it was. Whitethorn at the time were sharing a Morris stand with Martha Rodens and Shropshire Bedlams. And my dad thrust his pokework into my hands and said, "Hold this, I need the loo." And off he went. So I sat down to watch Martha Rodens dance. And I was holding the Melodeon, and I don't know why, but I put the strap on my shoulder and I put my hand through the bass strap and I put my fingers on the buttons. It was done up. And John Kirkpatrick started playing for Martha Rodens. And I can still remember it, and it gives me goosebumps just to even describe what happened, because all the hair on my body stood on end, and my hands and my arms and my fingers started moving like independently of any autonomic control I might have. And I just looked down at this thing, and it just smiled back and went, "Hi."
And it came to life.
That was it. Had me at hello.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot here. So John Kirkpatrick basically kind of had puppeteered and I guess you'd grown up watching your dad and that kind of stuff, and it was just in there.
Well, I'd grown up watching John. It wasn't the first time I'd seen that Morris team, and I'd seen John in Brass Monkey and, all the rest of it. Over the years at Watford Folk Club, I'd seen him solo, and I'd always thought, well, that's amazing. But I was holding Melodeon when he made his pokerwork sing, and really sing. There are a lot of people play Hono pokerworks, and there are, I would consider, very few who can actually get the best out of one. And obviously John is right up there, the original. And I think just the combination of what he was doing specifically at that time and the fact that I was holding one just made me go, right, okay, you and I, here we go, let's find out.
Interesting you should say that. I was watching Rodens and Bedlams at Shrewsbury just a few days ago, and I was very much enjoying John's playing 2-row 8 bass, Hono poker work, but he just somehow just animates it in a way that it's magic, and it just is the effect it has on the feet and the floor and the hankies and everything. It's just absolute poetry in motion. Yeah,
I had a Ceilidh equivalent actually a few years later. Before I got my first Castanari, I was 14 when I got my first one. But the first time I saw Gasmark 5 and heard Dan Quinn in that lineup and what he was doing with that made me go, oh God, there's another one. Right, I have to learn everything he's ever played now. Yeah.
So what was it that drew you into Castagnari? Was it something that you just were given, or did you desperately need one or want one? Or
this comes back to my dad. A lot of this comes back to my dad. He really has. He's been such a star for believing in me and promoting me through financial support or just so a couple of things about my dad. How I got my first Castanari. So Andy Cutting came to a Herb Morris practice when he was about 17, 18 with his, at the time, very new Mori. It doesn't look like that anymore, but he's put a few miles on it, and just played almost like a dance monkey dance play, because there was a lot of old boys in that time. It was a proper ringside, and I thought he was quite brave coming in in his late teens, having just been signed to Blows-Bella to play a bit. And what he did was mind-blowing, just immediately mind-blowing. The tone, the timing, the technique, and just the quality of the instrument. By then, I'd been playing a little bit. I'd been playing a couple of years, and I thought, okay, that is the next step. But I went to a John Kirkpatrick workshop and talked with him about it, and he said the thing to do, if you want one, get one. I don't like them, but that's neither here nor there. But he said, before you get any more buttons, make sure that you've run out of buttons. If you can extract everything you think you can extract out of 208 bass, and you go, okay, I really want an F sharp chord, go and get yourself a Castanari. And in fact, my first one was a Castanari Donny 8, which was an 8 bass, 2.5 row, 4 button half row. But it opened things up for me. It really did. And the reason I got that is we go back to Chippenham Folk Festival, and I am stood at a set of traffic lights, waiting for the lights to change, rather casually playing Salmon Tails on the Water on the left hand of a Hona Pokerwork. And my dad went, Mum, listen to this. He's playing a tune on the left hand. I didn't even know you could do that. So I got marched to Hobgoblin, to the craft store, which was opposite the Drill Hall at the time. And they had a studio and a Donny 8. And I played them both. And the studio was never a match for the Donny 8. It was more cheaply made, and the reeds were less expensive.
It's the entry-level model, isn't it, I think?
Yeah, it is. Unless you count the Lily, and I don't. Personally, I'm not massive.
I feel the same.
Yeah, there we are. Any Lily owners, sorry. So yeah, he whacked it on the credit card. So we'll go back to me breaking my leg. The first time I broke my leg, it took a long while for them to get the bones straight. So I had a lot of time sitting about, and it was 6 months before I danced again. And that's when I really got into the squeeze box. I was like, okay, now I've got time, and I am sat down, so let's carry on. But because I broke it at school, my parents sued the Education Authority for negligence, which I think was fair enough, because a climbing frame fell over and broke my leg.
Yeah.
And I was awarded some money, and it started out as a fairly big chunk for 1985, and then by the time I finished spending it in the early 90s, it had matured to twice that in a wise bit of investment. And with it, I bought 4 Castanaris, 1 Saltarell, and a Mark IV Cortina.
Oh my God! I mean, that is a lot of money. I mean, I don't say it, but that is an amazing pot that allowed you to have all of that.
Yeah, really lucky.
And were you gigging by then? Had you started your first bands or anything?
So Benskin started in 1987, just sort of in the middle of that. And we did have a little Benskins K band, probably by about 89, 90. I'd become really handy enough for other people in the team to go, we could do K's with this guy. Let's do K's with this guy. He's good. So yeah, got off to a great start with, as you'd expect, great support from the Morris team. Lovely places to grow up in Morris. It was such a great community, really friendly. And I have to say, as a child, you learn how to talk to adults in a way that the people that I went to school with and grew up with, where I lived in Watford, had no idea how to talk to grown-ups. Not even a clue. And they were always amazed when I could hold my own in an adult conversation.
I noticed this myself. From a young age, I did amateur dramatics and was in the Morris from when I was 10. But Amdram started when I was 8, and it was just a multi-generational company of people that were all friends immediately. And, you just gang about, you socialise together, etc., etc. And then Morris came along, and, it was the most incredible, melting pot of ideas and just development personally. Self-expression, I think, was a huge part of it. We're encouraged to... I grew up in a border side, and it taught me a lot about... I was foreman for a while, so it's about that kind of, I'm the youngest person who is teaching the older people and how to navigate all of that. And then I do what I do now with mostly people who are very much older than me, and it's never, until somebody points it out, it's like, oh, well, so what? It's never been a problem to have friends who are older than me, and
they're just people, aren't they? And they're people with a really keen common interest, and that's more important than just hanging around with your own generation. That doesn't.
And also that kind of, I've never really got on. I say got on. I've always struggled to have friends my own age. That's probably the better way to say it. But the learning aspect, kind of looking up the generational ladder and people having things to teach you. I've always loved that. I think that's really special and important about extended family, because I mean that is what Morris is, right? And you have people that across the country, and
it's why I teach now. Teaching could be difficult because you quite often you can bamboozle people quite quickly, and I like light bulbs going on, and I just want to share what I got from the process of starting out as a kid, being in a Morris team, getting support from various musicians. I've mentioned Paul Nye from Random. I should mention Steve Howe, who lives in Chippenham now. He was in Benskins and had a really he had that really sort of rock and roll style of box that I ended up adopting. And quite a long right strap, so quite a low slung box. And I just thought, yeah, that's cool. I'm having some of that.
So when did you start kind of making the big time, shall we say? You know, kind of what was your first major band that was taking you around the country gigging at festivals?
Well, it involved my dad again. So by the time I was 18, 19 years old, I think I was 19, by then Dad and I had a Tuesday club. So we'd go either to Watford Folk Club, which was on a Tuesday, or we'd go to the pub. And that particular January night in 1994, he said, right, what do you want to do? And I said, well, who's on? And he said, Waterson Carthy. And I was like, I like Martin, but I don't know about the rest of it. You know, don't think I'd seen Norma before. And I didn't know what an Eliza Carthy was. I said, no, God, let's go to the pub. And he said, no, overruled. Get your box. Come on, we'll go down there. I want to hear you play. Come on, I'll buy you beers. Don't worry, you still get beers. We'll have a beer at the folk club. Don't worry. So off we trotted, and I put my name down on the floor singers as I always do. I mean, I wasn't allowed to not when I walked through the door there. They did love it, and I stood up and played Old Molly Oxford and the Princess Royal. And in the interval, Eliza, who at the time, if I was 19, she'd have been 17, came over and said, I'm thinking about forming a band with my mate Nancy, and we're looking for somebody like a box player, someone like you. What do you reckon? And I replied, let me think about it, yes. And that was that. We formed the King's Calicut, which started as a trio. There's only a couple of recordings of that anywhere, one of which is on an album called Evolving Tradition 1. It was just called Evolving Tradition at the time. And yeah, the King's Calicut was a dynamic place. We were all late teens, early 20s by the time it sort of really got going. And you can imagine what happens in a band like that. It's a rocky road. And Nancy left, and Barn Stradling joined, and then we've got Maclaine Colston in, and Dan Plews was in it for a bit. James Fagan was in it for a bit. And we ended up with a lineup which was myself and Eliza and Maclaine, Barn on bass, and a lad called Andy Wells on drums. And that was the lineup that recorded the one and only album that it did. And almost straight after we'd launched that, Eliza got signed to Warner Brothers, and it went poof in a cloud of dust. And I'm sort of glad it did, because it made one incredible album, which is what I can only describe as punk folk. But at the same time, Waterson Carthy were recording their first album, and they said, would you come up and play a bit on it? Just, a little bit of guest musician. And a few of us that were playing music with Eliza at the time, not in Waterson Carthy, came up, and they liked what I did. So I stuck around and ended up being the fourth member for years on and off. When Eliza got signed to Warner Brothers, they said, you can play folk music, but you can have 1 month a year. And I thought, well, I can't, what am I going to do for the other 11 months? I don't have another band. So I ducked out and said, right, I'm going to get a job, pay the mortgage. My eldest child, Molly, was born in 99, and I had a mortgage to pay and a child to feed. So I went and worked I went back to pharmacy for a bit. Remembered I wasn't very good at it, and then I worked for AstraZeneca for 6 years as a medical sales rep.
Well, we should pause here actually and just talk about that a bit, because there has been a bit of a theme developing as I've been interviewing more and more Melodeon players, and there is this, I mean, I knew it before, but there is this massive Venn diagram crossover between the sciences and the Melodeon.
It's weird, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's just a kind of like, we have a certain type of brain. If you play this instrument, you have to be able to work stuff out and problem solve, and that tends to relate quite heavily to sciences and tech and stuff like that. So when did you make the decision to do that? Like, did you go to university? Was it the general slog of being a young person, school and uni and pharmacy was where you wanted to?
I didn't go a conventional route, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And at the age of 16, I walked out of A-levels at senior school because the head of sixth form was not compatible with me. That's a diplomatic way of putting that. So I was sat about at home, and my mum started describing me as the consumer of supplies. So rather than just going to college and doing A-levels, which is what I thought I'd do, she said, come and get a summer job. She was working in HR at Norfolk Park Hospital in Harrow, and so she knew all the posts that were going temporary or otherwise. So I dabbled a bit in microbiology, and then went to work as a pharmacy assistant in the pharmacy, which was just 2 floors below the microbiology department. And it sort of stuck, and they recognised some potential, and they sent me to college, bless them. And over a period of years, and not that many years, I managed to get enough vocational qualifications to call myself a pharmacist. And I specialised in pharmaceutical manufacturing, actually, which was great because Norfolk Park had a big pharmaceutical manufacturing department, and I ended up running that, which was good. Unfortunately, that was I just got that job just as I met Eliza, and so I quit and went on tour for most of the late 90s.
And then what happened? Yeah.
What happened, and then I was happily beavering away as a medical sales rep when Faustus came calling, and Waterson Carthy also came calling, because in 2006 Tim left to go and do Warhorse at the National. He was in a position where he sort of had to quit Dr. Faustus. I don't think he wanted to, but he did. In the sort of years of 2004-05, Paul and I had met, and we'd started hanging out a bit, and we didn't live that far apart, and he's got kids about the same age as my eldest, so we were hanging out, and then he said, well, I've got this Ceilidh with Benji. You know Benji? I was like, I know Benji. And so we did a few Ceilidhs under the name of the village hall in Whapweasel. It's called the Colonel Jenkins Memorial Hall. So we went out as the Colonel Jenkins Memorial Band, and it was just a blast. I mean, I'd experienced playing with some good musicians, but I'd never had that incredibly tight trio that happens immediately, where all 3 of you are about the same level. The sky's the limit. I mean, that music went everywhere and anywhere we wanted it to, and it was utterly extraordinary. And when Tim and Rob finally said, okay, we're calling it a day with Dr. Faustus, Paul just chucked both albums at me and went, can you learn that by Friday? Yeah, yes, I can. The autumn of 2006, I'd rejoined Waterson Carthy, and Faustus was now a thing. We'd made our little 3-track demo, and I was staring down the barrel of 2 tours, one in October and one in November, and I was thinking, how am I going to do this? I don't have enough annual leave. And I went to Towers in 2006 and joined Whapweasel. It's 18 years ago yesterday, I think.
Oh, wow.
And I went back to work, and AstraZeneca decided that no one was working hard enough, and we all needed to rocket up our backsides. And so this great meeting was called. And I just literally got out of the car from Towersy, and I walked into this horrible meeting, and I just thought, do you know what? No, I quit, and my boss's jaw hit the floor, which was really good fun. Never looked back, and I've been playing music for a living since.
Amazing. You told me that you'd also done a stint as a paramedic, but I don't know how that, or did I make that up? Did I hear?
I haven't done a stint as a paramedic. What I did, so one of the things that I was lucky to get whilst working for the NHS was quite a lot of life support training. When you have quite a lot of life support training, a weird thing happens that people decide they're going to have their heart attacks next to you, including the late Paul Sartin. But honestly, I went through a little spate of discovering road traffic accidents. I'd literally be the first car around the corner, and there was these 2 cars in the middle of the road with steam pouring out, and people in a desperate state. Just go, okay, I'm trained. You get out the car and you just start compressions or whatever it is you need to do. Yeah, I mean, I reckon I could be a paramedic. I think I'd probably be quite good at it. I also drive like the wind as well. So
fabulous.
Anyway,
I mean,
yeah.
A very decorated, career in terms of, portfolio careers go. That's quite varied, isn't it? But to get that offer of that you said the double tour, and as well as that, I guess you replaced Tim in Waterson Carthy as well.
Well, Tim and I. So there's not very many Melodeon players that can. I got this in my audition for Warhorse, which was another job swap that he and I did, which is, can you stand up, play, sing, and walk at the same time? And you'd be surprised how many people can't do that, because it just involves too many factors. There's too many things going on. I think possibly because my first instrument was drums, kit drums, that I've always had a way of being able to segment my brain and just get on, like park stuff on autopilot and get on with the rest of it consciously if necessary. Tim and I end up swapping jobs all the time. It's just how it is because we're both capable of replacing each other. We do. And he went into Waterson Carthy in 2000, came back out in 2006, and I went back in. And it didn't do it for very long before Norma just called time on touring. So we parked it. We thought, if it's not going to be the four of us, we won't do it. And Norma wanted to sit in a chair and watch Corrie, so fair enough. And then when Tim finished with Warhorse, Roger Wilson did it for a bit, and then before Bob Fox did it, I did.
I think I saw you. I saw it twice. And when I saw you, I was sat second row back. You came and you sat right in front of me and sang one of the songs of the show. It was a delightful opportunity to just stare at your face for quite a while. Sorry to interrupt the interview, but I just wanted to let you know that there's been a massive chunk of this episode edited out of the Free Public podcast to keep it to an hour, and it's actually available via the extended episode, which you can subscribe to my Patreon to listen to. In this month's extended episode, you'll get to hear me and Saul comparing our experiences of working in large commercial theatre projects, the rough with the smooth. A lot more of his experience of working with Paul and Benji and Faustus and how they arranged and worked together, and Saul's top tips for how to adapt from working in big bands to small duos and everything in between. Luckily, we had such a lovely conversation. Editing this has actually been quite tricky, so you'll get a lot of bang for your buck if you sign up this month to get the extended podcast. If you do decide to sign up, you not only get Saul's extended podcast, but you get every guest tutor's extended podcast with your subscription. If you're interested in any of that, you can check out the link below to subscribe to my Patreon, and now we'll get straight back to the interview. So where have things gone since then? We talked about the beginning of Faustus and and working with Paul and Benji. I mean, that collaboration went on until it very hastily stopped, unfortunately.
Well, it did take a pause. There was a hiatus, and that was when Benji was on a retainer with Seth Lakeman. And what that meant was when you sign a retainer, you get more money, but it means that he can say, right, I'm calling a tour, it's starting in 6 weeks and it goes on for 3 weeks. I don't care what you've got, cancel it. So we just decided that we tried to expand Faustus with James Fagan and Pete Flood and Benji when he was available. And it wasn't a bad 5-piece, it was quite nice, but it wasn't Faustus. And the three of us sort of quite keenly felt it. And then I got Warhorse and he got Seth. And Paul's Paul, he was always busy.
He was always already in Bellowhead by that point as well, I suppose, and everything else.
Yeah, and still Belshazzar's Feast, and he was doing Remnant Kings with John Bowden. And Paul is he was a fantastic musician and always in demand. So we said, okay, well, we'll pause it for a bit and we'll see if it recommences. And so I did my year in Warhorse, and Benji did his year on Seth Retainer. And then we met the following early spring for Paul's 40th birthday in Whitchurch Village Hall, where he was living by then, for a shindig for him turning 40. And he was like, would you and Benji play in the Ceilidh? Well, yeah, of course we'll play in the Ceilidh. And then we got to the point of the night where you think, we should do a Faustus number. And we did 3 or 4. And when the three of us had finished crying, because it was so incredible to make that music again, we just, we're going to do it again. And we spoke to Pete, and Pete was like, I don't want to get in the way of you doing that. You should just do that. Well, James Fagan was a little bit annoyed, but I'm sure he's come to terms with it. And then the three of us set off again in 2012 until 2 years ago. I was there. Paul died on a gig with me. He and I were doing a little duo gig. It was a very typical Paul gig. We were playing the International, were they archaeologists? It was something at Oxford Uni anyway, of which Paul was an alumni twice. And they just wanted some incidental music whilst they had dinner. And so we'd set up. I brought a little PA down, and we'd set up. And the barman came along and said, "Oh, do you want a beer?" And we were like, "Oh, yeah, beer, lovely." So we just sat with our beer, chatting with the woman who'd organised it. When Paul dropped dead at my feet, and the same barman came up and said, "Are you okay?" And I went, "No, I'm not okay." But and he said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Not trying to be funny, but who are you?" because I know you as the barman, right?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, that's totally fair enough. I would ask the same question. My name's Nick, and I do this to top my money up. Most of the time, I'm an A&E staff nurse. I was like, hi, Nick.
Fantastic. So he was
we
in
go.
your position of finding things happening in front of him, I suppose,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
absolutely.
Wow,
Absolutely.
incredible.
So that's what happened that night. And they 5 ambulances, 2 police cars. There were 7 paramedics, 2 of which were consultants. One was the senior A&E consultant, the John Radcliffe in Oxford. They worked on him for an hour. He died before he hit the floor. There you go. So if anyone was wondering what happened to Paul, that's what happened to Paul.
You know, if you're going to go, that's quite a nice way to go. It's horrendous for everybody else around, and particularly Paul's, family and close friends. But yeah, I remember being on the stage actually rehearsing in Birmingham, and we heard the news, and everything crashed down to a stop for a bit, even though we were crazily busy. But I mean, how has it been since? I mean, it sounds like such a simple question to ask with so many consequences, but to suddenly lose such a great friend and musical hero.
So Faustus is over. I think Benji and I are agreed that you just can't replace Paul Sartin, and nor should one try.
No.
It always amused me that when he depped out of Bellahead, he had to have 2 deps, because there just aren't many people that could play the violin and the oboe to the level that he did.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you talked to classical bods about his oboe playing, they'd be like, I actually don't know how he's doing what he's doing. So that's the level that Paul was out on that. So I miss hanging out with a pair of those. They were great mates. It was a lovely trio of friends. We didn't always get on like houses on fire. Touring's difficult, but we always found a way to clear the air and be friends by the end of a tour. And honestly, the music, I'll never make music like that again. I can't see how. I can't see how you'd find 3 more people who could be so much greater than the sum of the parts. We got incredibly lucky with the vocal match. Our 3 vocals just slotted together, and they're very unlikely that it would with Paul's classical training. But what a vocal sound it was. So I really miss it. I hadn't finished with that music and those people. So Benji and I will find a way of playing music again together. We don't know what that is yet, but it's less than 2 years, so it's still, I guess, for me, a bit fresh. And I don't know. So Benji and I did a few gigs after he died, because it was immediately before we were about to do a 3-week tour. And I think we did 4 of those in the end, and that was all we could manage, because it was emotional.
It's heart-wrenching every single time.
Every single time, yeah, definitely. Faustus was always a mainstay of my income, because Paul was really on it for admin and PRS and all the stuff that makes you money, is making the tour work, making it flow, making sure people are there, and then playing venues that play decent amounts of PRS and MCPS and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm supplementing my income with a bit of building work at the moment, but that's all right. That keeps me strong. Make sure I don't cut my fingers off, But my workload is down, but that coincides with me. I've got a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, my girls, and my now 25-year-old. She lost me for half the year. Every year, off I'd go, and I'd go for 3 weeks or a month, or I went to Australia for 2 months. That sort of thing, because that's what you do. You have to make it cost effective. And so she missed out on quite a lot of dad time as she was growing up, and she was okay with it, but I'm older and calmer now, and I see things, I think, better for what they are. And so the fact that I'm not doing as much actually sits quite well. My other half's a GP, so we're not, desperate for money, and I get to watch my younger 2 grow up, and
that's the thing.
Be a day-to-day part of that. I get to take them to school and cook their food and stuff like that. So
the alternative to being a busy musician is just like being a father and watching your girls grow and being there when they get home and having all of that incredible everything, really. I've done some work with kids this summer and last summer, and even it's the same group, and it's 1 year watching them develop, but I'm mesmerised by it. It's incredible. So to see that all the time.
Yeah, it is mesmerising.
Very special.
the thing when I was going away all the time, Molly, I'd come back and Molly would be, a foot taller, or she'd learn French, or it's just like, oh my god, 4 weeks. Do you mind? And so I get way less of that. I mean, I was away for about 10 days earlier in the year, and I came back, and my youngest Elsie was a foot taller. I was just like, what happened to you? So I still get a little bit of that. I get to spend more time with them, and I don't mind being house husband. I'm pretty good at it, to be honest. Yeah.
Handy. Do you get to spend any time with Will and Joe, Paul's boys, at all?
If we're going to have some silver linings, then becoming close to them was one of them. Both Tim Van Eyken and I, and a lot of other people, really went out of our way to put his sons under our wing, and just let them know that they can have a father figure. They can have some of that. If you just want to go to the pub and talk bollocks, or if you have some serious man questions that you would have gone to your dad for, and you don't feel that you can with your granddad or whatever, that we're here, and just checking in on them. I've seen them a fair bit this summer, not for a massive lengths of time, because they're both gigging musicians now.
I saw them at Shrewsbury and could not be more proud. And I actually had a little tear, because it felt like Paul was actually stood next to me watching them, and I thought, wow, wouldn't he be proud? And there was that really gorgeous moment of watching them at the beginning of their career doing such a great job, but you could see that they were learning the patter and how to be comfortable on stage. But the musician skills, just undeniable. They're going to go far if that's what they want to do. They've got it all.
I know Will's reading, I think it's engineering at Sheffield, but Joe's reading music at Southampton. I think he's just finished, actually.
I was talking to Doug Bailey, who, for those that don't know, sort of runs Wild Goose and is the boy's granddad, and he was saying that he's very much mostly in the studio more than Doug now, so kind of running his own show there, which is great.
Yeah, totally. Sound engineering and just honing those skills, and they both sing beautifully. Joe was a chorister at Winchester for a bit, so he's got that thing that his dad had of a bit of classical training, some technique to sit back on, and so Joe's voice is particularly reminiscent of Paul, but the two of them playing together and singing together. I mean, I'm looking forward to my royalties for some of those arrangements, boys. Just if you're listening, Jesus, have it. I don't want the money.
Well,
I'd rather they were happy.
Maybe you never say never, but there might be some opening for you in a future lineup, perhaps. I don't know. That would be quite nice, maybe just stepping or stepping in, guesting, whatever it might be. But I can. Well,
they've made an EP, but they're threatening an album. When they do that, they want both Benji and I to come and play a bit on their album,
awesome.
Which we will do in a heartbeat, no doubt about it.
Amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And we've had Joe singing Brisk Lad a couple of times, including Paul's funeral. I have no idea how we did that, but we did. And then a couple of those gigs after Paul died on the tour. We've got the boys to come and support us, and then get up at the end and sing Brisk Lad and bring the house down.
Yeah, I was going to say that was the first track I went to, because was that Paul's arrangement, the vocal harmony in that is just I just don't understand. I don't understand what's happening, but it's just so powerful. And like you say, the three voices, like you're very lucky to have vocally matched in such an incredible way. But that particular track is my go-to Faustus track.
What you might not know about that is originally I learnt the high part, and then begged Benji to swap with me because his voice is naturally slightly higher.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Paul was like, no, you can do it. I know you can do it. And I was like, yeah, I know I can do it, but we'd quite like this to be consistently nice. So if we swap, yeah.
So you've got quite the range then, in that sense.
The older I get, the better it gets, actually. So I cut my teeth singing bass in Waterson Carthy, and currently my lowest note is probably a C, round about there somewhere. And I can go 4 octaves up from that. And I have a usable head voice as well. Which I use as just backing vocals. I'm not Jimmy Somerville. He is. So I wouldn't lead a song in my head voice. But if you just want up there somewhere, something just pretty little kind of twinkly backing vocals, I do that in the Winter Wonderland a little bit. where I sing the lowest note and the highest note in one piece. And that's in a band with Beth Porter as well, who has an extraordinary range. Wow, voice is like any other instrument. I had this discussion with various people at the weekend saying, how do you sing so well? I do it a lot.
Yeah.
There it is. Try it. It's called practice. Yeah.
I mean, actually, this naturally segues into what you're going to be providing this evening. As we're recording this, everybody, you know the ritual by now. I record this before it goes out. And Saul's going to be stepping in as a guest tutor on my Patreon this evening. Total Melodeon. And yeah, take it away. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to be up to this evening and what people can get on the recording if you're listening to this after it's gone out.
Yeah, cool. So it's sort of slightly tongue-in-cheek reference to the 80s Dutch football team who were extraordinary, and they had their football described as total football because every part of the pitch, everyone did what they were supposed to, and they played as a really fluid team. And it's about understanding. So Total Melodeon is about understanding your melodeon so that you can make informed choices, be it bass selection, chord selection, what you're going to play. You walked into a session, someone's playing something in E minor, you don't know it, but you can hear the chord sequence because you've got ears, and you might like to bolster that chord sequence or even suggest some alternatives to whoever's playing those chords, just to be able to make informed choices right across your squeeze box and understand how these two sections go together, because people, you're playing two instruments at once. They're two different scale patterns, which means you're playing two instruments at once. I know they're connected and they are dependent on each other, but in order to extract the best out of your melodeon, we have to get to a total melodeon understanding.
How do you relate to the instrument then? Like in your mind, in your body, in your physical sense of what the melodeon is? Where's your approach to it?
My approach to it is very much that when you play a compromised instrument, you have to understand what those limitations are and therefore what you can and can't do. And I would like to go right up to the limit of them. And I continue to do that because I play a 3-row 18 bass. It is fully chromatic on both ends, but I don't have every note in every direction. It is still a melodeon in that respect. Or diatonic button accordion, should Professor Cutting be listening. Anyway, I want to take what the box is capable of doing to the limit of it, and find where it is, and then buy 124. But that's another matter. And to do that, you have to be doing it. You have to be pushing yourself and the instrument to the edge of its capabilities. But whether that is manifests itself as an example I give in workshop quite a lot. If you pick any tune, for instance in G, I want to play that tune and I want to play a rising bass line up the G scale. And I'll just keep going up the G scale, obviously get to the bottom again, until you run out of tune or you run out of options. And then I might try and play a descending G bass line over the same tune and make my right hand do the work and my left hand. And just because I chose that bass line, I just want to choose a bass line and make it fit the tune within the limits of what's possible. Once you're there, then you can play any bass line you like. And if you happen to find yourself in a band with Benji Kirkpatrick, you need to be ready to do this. Talking about the Faustus music, we would take a song and it could be 7 verses long, and every single one of those 7 verses would be different.
Yeah.
Chordally. And it might be quite subtle or it might not be quite subtle, but they would be different, and you'd have to know which one was coming and how you're going to go about it, because it changes obviously how you play any particular piece. If you change the left hand, you will inevitably have to change the right hand. If you're going to play something slightly different on the right hand, it might not fit what you were doing on the left hand. And so I want to be able to understand what's going on so that I can do that really quickly or real time. In my case, I like to do that real time. So that's where we're talking about being incredibly informed as to what all the buttons do and how you can get from one set of circumstances to another. You know, if the chord sequence changes, if you're playing with a guitar player who goes, I'm going to go this way now, can you respond to that within the tune that you're playing? That's it. That's what I'm all about.
I would imagine that quite a lot of that ability comes from sitting for hours and hours playing in sessions, playing for Morris, watching other musicians and really taking hints. I've heard you say it in a workshop I attended with you about, can I be a bass guitar? Can I be a saxophone? Can I be a fiddle? And really trying to emulate sounds, rhythmical techniques, bowing patterns, strumming patterns, can you make that happen on the Melodeon? And that's one of the fun things for me, is if I'm in a really nice session that's just gelling really nicely, I tend to find myself gravitating towards the guitarists that have got those really nice jazzy strumming patterns, and it just comes across in my bellows or in my chugs or whatever on the right hand. And I think,
it's making music, isn't it? It's listening to other musicians and getting into the groove that they're in. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
As well as the Morris community, that session community, in terms of galvanising musicianship and listening skills, I think those things, socially and musically, those are the two things for me that kind of make sense for what my life has become and the meaning that I have in the groups that I'm in. Yeah, and the skills that I've been able to learn to go into everything else, musical, professional, because like yourself, I'm also self-taught and find myself sometimes in circumstances where I'm like, I'm just gonna sit and pretend I know what you're talking about, or maybe just gently ask some questions afterwards, but and do some reading for homework or whatever. But you do pick up a lot along the way, and it's I always say to people, you don't have to know the theory, but it can help. And gradually you pick up more and more as you go, because it's very overwhelming, and there's always going to be theory that I won't understand, but I won't necessarily need to understand it for what I'm doing, and that's fine with me. I'm okay with that.
Absolutely. And even if you don't get the same, there's a lot of phraseology that goes on in music that I think leaves people cold. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't know that. If what you're playing sounds the same as the guy sat next to you, you're playing the right thing. And understanding, where that is on your accordion and what it's at. I mean, if you're going to have to do it by ear every time, that's going to be quite complicated. And I think it's probably worth just learning the names of the notes on each button of your squeeze box, because it means you can have a conversation with another musician, because no other musician on earth, by the way, understands the Melodeon. They don't. They have no idea what's happening there.
You play in like big bands, small bands, solo. How does that change how you approach the situation in terms of arrangements, what you bring to the party with the Melodeon? Because, if you're fitting into a back line, how does that then change when you're just playing as a duo?
Yeah, good question. So it's about adapting and playing appropriately. And a good example would be the 3 gigs that I did at Shrewsbury on Sunday and Monday. I did one on the village stage with James, where we played fairly uppy because we were outdoors and the weather was nice, and we thought, it's a nice jolly afternoon, people having a beer and sitting on the grass, we'll play uppy stuff. And then we played Sabrina, the concert stage, so we took it down a bit, and we both played a bit more lush, and we gave a lot more space, and we took the tempos down a bit. And then the following day I played the Ceilidh with James and his brother Dave, and I played the living daylights out of it. That's because the guys either side of me would come with, if I take it up, not in terms of tempo, but in terms of dynamic, they come up with it. So, yeah.
What an incredible conversation. There's been so many places that we've gone that I was not expecting to go. And it's just a huge career, and all, I think I'm right in saying, all within the English idiom and the kind of English tradition. Have you ever done any fusion or crossover? I can't think of any. Maybe with Eliza, I don't know. There's been all sorts of shows.
Still no. I mean, Eliza likes gigging in Scotland, so we go up there, but we still just play our stuff.
Yeah.
No, I'm an English folk musician, and I'm very happy with that. There's enough material, enough room, and hopefully we're starting to understand why the Scots, the Irish, the Welsh, and the Cornish all have a bit of pride in their traditions, and never mind the rest of Europe. And I'd like to think that the English folk scene has established itself as a bona fide tradition, and that people that dedicate themselves to it become, for want of a better phrase, a bit hackneyed this one, but a custodian of that tradition, and so that we will take English folk music and champion it. And I have a problem with that. I don't need to wave St George's flag. It's got nothing to do with what colour the flag is. Can give a toss. The fact is, this music's been played in this country, and there's some fantastic music. There's time signatures you don't find anywhere else on earth. Where else plays in 3/2, for crying out loud, or 9/4? It's just It doesn't happen. So I'm perfectly happy being an English folk musician. even if it means I'm quite poor.
Oh, if only we had some funding bodies like, in Scotland and Ireland that kind of really champion things, but it would change it, I think. There is, I hope that it does get to that stage one day where it is nationally recognised and celebrated, but I'm very happy with how it is at the moment, and having this, this subsect of society that are the best people in the world, in my opinion. And I think that stands for itself. Thank you very much for sharing everything that you have. Is there anything that you'd like to plug? Have you got any upcoming tours or gigs or anything at all?
Well, I am on tour with James Delarre in November, and I believe we have a Linktree page which will involve the words James Delarre and Saul Rose.
I'll make sure that that's linked down below.
I am absolutely rubbish at websites, social media, responding to emails, and so I'm not the right person to ask. What I do is I look in my Google Calendar and I see what I have next week.
That is now how I live my life, and I have to say it's a lot less stressful to think only 1 week ahead.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
It is. Well, thank you very much. And just to remind you that Saul's Melinar on Total Melodeon is available via my Patreon, which is also linked down below. So if you would like to get involved in that, I think it's going to be full of everything you'd ever want to know about Melodeon in an hour. So I think that's worth £10 of your money to sign up and get that. Thank you so much, Saul.
Pleasure.
And I'll see you in just a bit.
Lovely.
And wasn't that great? Thank you so much to Saul for giving me his time, and I really appreciate all of that wonderful conversation, and I hope you did too. Don't forget to check out all the links down below to anything that Saul's mentioned, and the Total Melodeon Melinar, which you can get on replay via my Patreon. This month my guest is the fantastic young musician Will Allen. You probably know him from all of his postings on Facebook throughout lockdown, where he posted a tune a day either on fiddle or Melodeon. And he is one of these guys that I am absolutely intrigued by. He's an old head on young shoulders, massive beard, so it makes him very folk appropriate for multi-generational audiences. He's an incredibly entertaining person, and I'm really interested in getting to know him better. He's going to be leading a Melinar for me on Wednesday the 25th of September, all about how to take influence from other instrumentalists and other genres. So if you don't know Will, he is a box player and a fiddle player, and he very much prides himself as an English musician. However, he does play Irish and he does play Quebecois music, and he takes influences from those traditions, and he sits in sessions for hours and hours. He's always one of those musicians that you'll see up until 4 a.m. in various different pubs and clubs and festival bars, and he is always picking and choosing different bits and bobs out of different genres and repertoires. It really shines through in his ability and dexterity on both instruments. I have asked him to give us a workshop on that very concept of how can I make my Melodeon sound like a fiddle, sound like a concertina, sound like XYZ, and also how can I take influence from different repertoires, how can I make it flow through into my English style of playing. So I'm really interested to see how he tackles that in just an hour. You can sign up to my Patreon for a minimum of £10 and you will be able to get that live. You can join us on Zoom Wednesday the 25th of September, 7 till 8 p.m. But if you can't make the live, there will be a recording which you'll be able to sign up to Patreon to access afterwards. Just a little plug from me. This month, September the 21st, I am going to be leading a Playing for Dance workshop in Weedon. For Weedon Balfolk, they are organising a day of workshops followed by an evening bal. I'm leading the music workshop, and my dear friend Ravi Sawney is going to be leading the dance workshop. And then his band Sawney White Bird and myself will be playing for the evening bal. If you're interested in accessing French dance, this is a really basic workshop with a very friendly atmosphere. It's very much designed around getting people into Balfolk dancing. So if you're interested in that from an instrumental point of view or from a dance point of view, you will be catered for. That will be Saturday the 21st of September. I will leave details to that down below where you can find out more details and get your tickets. Thank you ever so much for listening this month. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or follow me on any of the platforms that you are listening on. Please don't forget to review the podcast. That will be very, very lovely, and I will see you again next month. Thanks ever so much, everyone. Bye.